glottis, or the space in between the vocal folds. When the glottis is closed, air pressure builds up beneath the vocal folds. That air pressure is too much for the folds to handle, and they are blown apart, and as the air travels through, the pressure beneath the vocal folds decreases. Once that pressure decreases, the vocal folds are strong enough to close back over that airstream, and they come together again. Air pressure again builds up, and the process is repeated. Now this happens hundreds of times a second when we are singing. For instance, if we are singing the pitch A440, the vocal folds open and close 400 times a second. This is what normal phonation looks like. Now sometimes the vocal folds don't come all the way together and we get breathy or airy phonation. In this instance, we never use all the adductor muscles to actually close the vocal folds, and the air pressure overwhelms them the entire time that they are vibrating, blowing them open. And it's a way of singing that can actually cause vocal damage. On the flip side, there's also overclosure or over-adduction of the vocal folds that can also lead to vocal damage. In this instance, the singer is using such strong adductory force or using their constrictor muscles alongside the adductors to force the vocal folds together so that they are almost constantly touching. This causes vocal impact, trauma in many instances, which can lead to nodules, cysts, or polyps, or other bad things that we don't want. So at the end of the day, what we are seeking is a balance of airflow and vocal fold closure that helps us produce the proper register.
By converting a sound wave into an electrical signal, you can view its waveform using an oscilloscope. But remember, sound waves are really longitudinal waves. So on the oscilloscope they'll look like they're a transverse wave, but it just helps us look into more detail at all the wave properties. The amplitude of the sound wave indicates the loudness of the sound. The louder the sound, the bigger the amplitude. And if you remember, we look at the amplitude from the midpoint to the peak of the wave, or from the midpoint to the trough. So the louder the sound, the bigger the amplitude. Sound wave A has a bigger amplitude than sound wave B. So we can say that sound wave A is louder than sound wave B. Now let's look at pitch. The frequency of the sound wave indicates the pitch of the sound. Frequency and wavelength are linked. For waves travelling at the same speed, the shorter the wavelength, the higher the frequency. So a couple of things to remember: we measure wavelength between the same point on two different waves. So here we've got the wavelength between two peaks, for example, or we could equally have the wavelength between two troughs, and that would be the same value, and that's measured in meters. So the shorter the wavelength, the higher the frequency. And as a reminder, frequency is the number of waves that pass a certain point every second, and that's measured in hertz. So waves A and B are travelling at the same speed. Wave A has a longer wavelength and a lower frequency than wave B. Wave B has a shorter wavelength and a higher frequency than wave A. So that's where we said that wavelength and frequency are linked, because this wavelength is very long and there's very few waves. There's one there, another one there, another one there. So very few waves that would be travelling past a certain point every second. Whereas this second wave has a much shorter wavelength, and the frequency, the number of waves that are going to pass a point per second, is much higher. So let's have a look at how that relates to pitch. Sound wave B has a higher frequency than sound wave A, so sound wave B has a higher pitch than sound wave A, because the higher the frequency, the higher the pitch. Humans can't hear sounds of any pitch. Humans can only hear particular frequencies. and frequency is measured in hertz. The range of frequencies that humans can hear is between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz. Let's look at what this kilo means. Well, 1 kilohertz is 1,000 hertz. So we can rewrite that and say therefore that the range of human hearing is between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. Sounds above 20,000 hertz are called ultrasound, and sounds below 20 hertz, which is the lowest limit that we can hear, are called infrasound. Many bat calls are above 20 kilohertz, so this would be in the ultrasound range. That means we can't hear them when they're flying around, communicating and navigating. So that's a pretty good thing, otherwise the night times would be very, very noisy if we could hear into the ultrasound range. So let's look at some of the hearing ranges of other animals. We've said that ours is between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. So for bats, their hearing is between 2,000 and 110,000 hertz. Dolphins, between 1,000 and 100,000 hertz. Dogs, between 67 and 45,000 hertz. And cats, between 45 and 64,000 hertz. So with dogs, you may well have heard of dog whistles that owners can use, but the owners themselves can't hear the sound from the whistle, because if our upper limit is 20,000 hertz and we use a whistle that is above 20,000 hertz, then the dog can hear it because its range goes up to 45,000, but we won't be able to hear it. Hi guys, if you enjoyed that last video, then please click on the screen to subscribe. You can also find all my videos in one place at gcserevisionmonkey.com. If you're a teacher, check out the Key Stage 3 package at sciencesurgery.com. It contains all of the Revision Monkey videos as well as loads more Key Stage 3 resources.